Hello, and welcome to my talk, Better Living Through Direnv. My name is Kyle Adams, and I've been doing Python development for about 15 years now. I'm a developer at a software consultancy based out of Columbus, Ohio, called TestDouble. If you haven't heard of us before, that's okay, because we have a bit of a reputation as a Ruby shop. We're also pretty well known in the JavaScript community. The truth is that we worked on projects across a variety of languages. In my 6 years at TestDouble, I've also done Elixir, C Sharp, Elm, PHP, Java, even a little bit of Go and Rust. Oh, and we also do Python, which is why I'm here today. If you've ever spent much time doing Python development, you know that we have a problem. Setting up a Python development environment can be hard. There are tools like PyEnv, which can help with managing Python versions. Virtual environment management is getting better with other tools like pipenv, Poetry, or Hatch. But let's put a pin in that for a moment, because the whole point of this talk is to get into Direnv. That said, before we get started, I need to be upfront about an important detail. Most of the content I'll be covering today presumes you're in a Unix-like environment, be that a Linux distro, Mac OS, or Windows subsystem for Linux. Technically, Direnv can work with PowerShell, but I've never tried it and have no idea what quirks might be encountered. So with that said, almost all the content that follows will take place in the terminal, or a simulated version thereof. All right, let's get started. Level 0. Let's walk through installing Direnv. First, we're going to install the Direnv package using our OS package manager of choice. Maybe that's Brew for Mac OS. Maybe it's apt for Debian or Ubuntu, whatever it is. We're going to let the installer do its thing. And then we're going to hook direnv into your shell. Now, there are two things I want to point out here. The first is that these eval statements are the important bit. You can edit your shell profile and add them, or you can echo them in as I'm doing here. The key thing is that your profile needs to evaluate direnv's hook. The second thing is to use the right hook for your shell of choice. Bash for bash RC, zshell for zshell RC. Make sure that whatever hook you're using matches up with whatever profile you're editing. I'll also note that Direnv supports and has documentation on hooking into other shells like Fish, TC shell, Elvish, and yes, even PowerShell. For expediency, we'll be assuming Z shell for the rest of the talk. Once we've hooked into Direnv into the shell, we just need to restart it. All right, let's fire our terminal back up and see what exciting things Direnv has for us. Huh, not much, right? Which brings us to level 1, setting up our first .envrc file. First, let's navigate into the project directory for a hypothetical Hobbit proverb generator. Now we're going to create a .envrc file. Oh, hi, Direnv. Direnv won't automatically run .envrc files without explicit approval. And this is a security thing to prevent your mischievous coworker from checking in a .envrc file into your repo that deletes your entire hard drive when you change into the directory. So now we're going to give our explicit approval to allow the .envrc to load. And we can see mission accomplished. Direnv now loads this .envrc anytime that we're in the Hobbit Proverbs directory. So now what? Setting environment variables, that's now what? We can add a name environment variable to our .envrc file. If you've ever defined an environment variable before, the syntax should look pretty familiar. Oh, okay. Because our .envrc file has changed, Direnv has stopped loading it automatically, at least until we've approved the updated version, which we'll do. Oh, nice. Direnv is now reporting that it's exported our name environment variable. Let's see if it works. And it did. Bilbo's bringing the sage advice, never laugh at live dragons. Uh-oh. Looks like our first boss is here. Let's see who we have. Okay. Yeah, I hear you, Pam. Some of you, especially if you've already used a .env file in your project, may be wondering what the difference is between a .envrc file and a .env file. Here's how I approach this question. I put environment variables that are specific to my local setup in .envrc. These may be issues of personal preference. What level of logging do you want to see when you're running an app locally, or something like name here that's going to vary from one developer's machine to the next. I then put environment variables like project name here that are shared across the team in my .env file. One note here, this approach assumes that you have some way, whether it's version control or notes passed via homing pigeon, to share that .env file with the rest of your team. A complete discussion on sharing .env files is beyond the scope of this talk, so let me just reiterate. Never version control files with secrets or credentials in them. One important difference between .envrc and .env that I wanted to point out. envrc uses export, while .env drops the export to just do variable equals value. Given all of that, if we have some of our environment variables in .envrc and some in .env, how do we integrate a .env into Direnv? Direnv has a standard library of functions that can be invoked. One of those is .env if exists, which will load the .env file. Since we've updated the .envrc with this .env if exists directive, we have to reapprove it again, which we'll do. And now we can see that Direnv has loaded both name from .envrc and project name from .env. That's great, but it's annoying having to reallow every time we edit the file. So let's talk about editor support. Direnv uses our editor environment variable to connect with the tool of our choice. We'll take a moment here to add that to our shell's profile, whether it's Vim or VS Code or some other editor. Don't forget to source your profile. Now you can use direnv edit to modify the .envrc file. For our example, we'll add a one ring variable in our editor, save and exit, and we now see one thing that happened and one thing that did not. First, our ring of power environment variable was loaded. Second, since we went through direnv to edit, there was no error and no need to invoke direnv allow. Nice progress. Level 4, it's time to start decluttering our profiles. We're going to start by going up one directory into the Tolkien parent directory and creating a .envrc file there too. We'll get our error message, but this time we're going to ignore it because we're going to use our direnv edit command to add a white wizard environment variable, and we're going to set that to Gandalf. Now that we see that Direnv is exporting that white wizard and it's working for the parent directory, we're going to go back into our project directory and add the source up directory. Now, source up is also, again, from that standard library of functions that Direnv has, and we can use it to include the parent directory's .envrc along with this directory's .envrc. And we can see here, direnv loading the parent directory's .envrc. And here we can see the new white wizard environment variable being defined within our project because it's been inherited from that parent directory. But what does source up have to do with decluttering our profiles? Let's take a look at a typical profile and ask, do these environment variables spark joy? It's pretty typical to see organization and project-specific environment variables cluttering up a profile. For example, some Tolkien projects may need a specific version of OpenSSL sent to the compiler when building Python's cryptography library. Or there may be an API key that's needed for accessing an organization's private package repo. These environment variables build up over time and do not bring joy. So let's give them a boot. Or rather, we can now move them into the organization-specific envrc file we just set up. Once we move them out of the profile, how does our profile look now? Much better. And this is it, our final battle. Can Direnv wrangle our Python environment? Direnv's standard library includes a variety of what they call layouts, including one for Python, which we'll add to our projects.envrc file here. Oh my goodness, that was so much easier than expected. Our boss is already on the ropes. But what happened here? Let's break it down. We can see that in response to our layout directive, Direnv has now added a virtualenv environment variable. It's also modified, that's what the tilde indicates, our path environment variable. Now let's take a brief moment here and talk about what happens when you type source bin activate as you would to normally activate your virtual environment. At its core, that command does two things. It adds a virtual environment variable, and it modifies the path, which we've done here with direnv. So does that mean our virtual environment is active? It does. But why isn't the virtual environment showing up in the prompt as it normally would? It turns out that PS1, which is the environment variable that defines how our prompt looks, is a bit of a special case. Direnv can't modify it directly. Consequently, we need to do a little bit more. We'll start by configuring a PS1 that uses another environment variable called a venv base. Don't forget to source that profile. And now we'll edit the .envrc to set venv base when virtual environment is activated. That's all that block of code does there, is it's setting venv base to the name of our virtual environment when that virtual environment is activated. What could this be? Could it be our virtual environment's activation is now indicated in the prompt? We see the virtual environment activated, and if we change to another directory, now it's not activated. Changing back in, and it's activated again. We did it. We defeated Python environment headaches with Direnv. To recap, here's what I hope you remember from my talk today. First, you don't need to bite off everything Direnv can do in one bite. You can do a little bit, learn, then level up when you're ready to learn a little bit more. Secondly, one of the first things you can do with Direnv is using it to automatically load up or source any environment variables your project uses. And lastly, because virtual environment activation is just setting environment variables, we can make it happen automatically when moving in and out of directories. If I piqued your interest, here's where you can get more details. Direnv.net is Direnv's home on the web. Additionally, their GitHub project has a community-edited wiki that includes a Python page. This page goes into all sorts of details I didn't cover here, including Direnv with PyEnv, pipenv, poetry, hatch, anaconda, and a host of other Python-related tools. I'll be posting more Python-related content on threads, and you can always get a hold of me via kyle@testlevel.com. I hope Direnv makes your life a little bit easier. Thank you for tuning in.